I felt the X39 within the first 10 minutes. I felt warmth and tingling go up my spine into my brainstem. And when I've used it for under my belly, it is actually gone to my pelvis and my groin. And so I knew that it was doing something. And I'm a biohacker, and I've been reading about GHK -CU peptide and purchasing vials and different ways to administer it. It is quite expensive. For me, it's life changing. There's no questions. Just I'm so grateful, just like anybody
Yeah.
else here. I think that's it, is like the relief that's come across, even though it's not like 100%, because I'm still living and there's still toxicity and there's still injuries and I'm still very physical. I can actually feel like I can maintain some of the things that I had already crossed off the list. And I'm only 41. I live in the mountains in Colorado, and I grew up in Telluride, and I live in Durango. And so I've done everything under the sun, physically, sport wise. And should I go into my?
So there were things that you had crossed off that you no longer thought you were going to be able to do that you're now able to do again. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, certainly not at the competent level that I was at one
Sure.
point. And
Well,
so
tell us what happened. Tell us a little bit about your injuries, and then what the patches did for you.
So growing up in the mountains, I've been susceptible to concussions. And for some people, they've had the same injuries or similar injuries and no concussions. And for people like me, I had 13 concussions, starting with playing football, helmet to helmet as a fullback to a middle linebacker. And I think I was like 11 or 12. And it changed the trajectory of my life. I didn't realize this until, of course, about 3 or 4 years ago, in the middle of someone else telling me his story about hitting a fullback. And I couldn't sleep, and I was puking. And then they told me I had a concussion. And of course I had to learn what that was. And I was in middle school. And I've been hit by a chairlift. I was a doorman in security. I broke up fights. And the last one, I was in a car wreck, self-caused through exhaustion and too much driving. And I was thrown 150 feet at 70 miles an hour, and I skipped across oncoming traffic on a 2-lane highway, and I landed about 10 feet to the side of it in some shrubbery. And the ambulance came and got me, blessedly. There was 2 witnesses, or well, there's more than 2, but 2 specifically that both saw me and thought I had died.
Sure.
And actually, we later confirmed, and they called the hospital, and we confirmed that I was still alive, that nobody died that day in car wrecks. That was a traumatic brain injury, and pre the NFL exposure of them trying to cover up the depth of concussions, traumatic brain injuries meant that you shouldn't be alive, that whatever you experienced, it's amazing that you're here. Everything from aneurysms to obviously fights, people falling off ladders, like it can happen at anything. And I went to TBI gatherings, and they couldn't really tell because I was pretty intact. I had broken my nose so systemically they didn't touch it.
So what were the symptoms of your TBI? What were the symptoms that you were looking for to help to have the patches help you with?
Focus, clarity, memory. When I talk to people, when I get really excited or something really intense happens, I would push things out of my head, the key words, or I would just forget what I was talking about. And I would need to change the subject to like regather myself. And so like 10 minutes later in the conversation, I'd be like, oh yeah, and then go back to this other thing. And it still happens. But already I've talked with other friends who've known me for decades. And one of my girlfriends was, we were on for like 3.5 hours. And she was like, you're so concise right now. At the very end, she pulled, she was like, hey, you're not saying and huh and as much as you were, and you were linear. You went from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and you didn't have to go back to figure out what you couldn't remember. And I was like, wow, you noticed that? And she's like, yeah, I was really clean. And what's going on with you? And so I explained to her.
Right. So that's almost like an incoherent system becoming coherent, and you can track your train of thoughts, and you have that tracking ability still.
Well, the biggest thing when you have concussions and you have traumatic brain injuries is the pathway inside your brain to connect your left and right hemispheres. That actually starts to calcify, that starts to shrink, that starts to harden. And that's your direct access to your amygdala, your hypothalamus axis, which
Sure.
is your HPA, and of course your pineal, and so much more. But so that communication system allows your left and right to function, and your emotionality to function.
Right.
And it's just commonly known that once you have the first concussion, the more concussions you have, that pathway starts to get more scrambled.
So that pathway started to repair and heal on the patch. Is what I'm
Yeah, it's very
understanding.
clear.
Perfect.
I feel much more stable. I can face stress differently. Um,
Excellent. And so tell me a little bit about your toes and your knee.
so when I was thrown from the vehicle, I skipped across the pavement, and I had a broken nose really distinctly. I had 3 broken ribs, and punctured lung, and all my other organs were intact. And I skipped across the actual road and had scars and bruising along my knees and my feet. And I actually tore the plate underneath my mound in my left foot and didn't realize it's called a plantar plate, and it goes all the way across underneath your mound. And for years, when it swells up or like extreme cold happens, when it knots up, it feels like I have a golf ball under the foot.
Okay.
Foot feels like it's on top of this, and it rotates back and forth. And just imagine having this ball every time you take a step. And
And that's
July, the lead in, because it gets
okay.
further. I had a
Okay.
Morton's neuroma, and the Morton's neuroma is when the metatarsals in your feet squeeze too tightly, or when the nerve starts to grow or gets pressurized into a new direction, and it causes neuropathy and nerve pain.
Okay. Okay. So you had neuropathy. Got it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it affected me. But the lead in here is that I was riding my bike one day, and I had this sharp pain in a regular movement that I knew. And I was like, whoa. And I was going uphill, I was going up a trail, and I had to stop before even halfway up the trail because I was doing it so many times and I didn't know how to not do it. And I didn't know what was going on. So I rode home, and then 11 months later, and 4 doctors and 3 misdiagnoses, I got the surgery. So the other piece, though, is that I was in Florida completing my 500-hour yoga certification, and I was in a deep stretch with like 2 or 3 days before completion, a deep split, and my left groin muscle tore, and it rides above the hamstring and connects to the inner knee, and then all the way down to the plantar plate. So I was feeling that in conjunction. The Morton's neuroma had
Sure.
only felt it for the first time 1 month before that. So then
Okay.
I added that to it. When I came back home, I had to start prepping for the winter, and I do banquets and a lot of restaurant and hospitality. So I'm usually on my feet for a very long time. And I was at a point where I went into urgent.
Oops. You muted yourself, Ryan. Yeah. Someone got how you got muted. So let's just run to what were the results from those 2 things? Like what's going on now? So you had both of those, the foot and the knee and the left groin. So what's happening now with the patch? How is that helped?
So I actually had surgery in June for the Morton's neuroma, and they removed about this much and a nerve cluster between my 3rd and 4th toe up on the outside foot. And I was having neuropathy when I was at work and having to ask for time off, or come in late, take longer breaks, and get out earlier, because the neuropathy, when I had put my foot directly on pressure, was my left side of my foot was on fire. When I would
Sure.
remove it, the plantar plate would throb.
And
And
are you still needing to ask for that time off or going late or?
no, the Morton's neuroma surgery allowed me to start walking and functioning again, but I hadn't
Mhm.
ridden my bike. I hadn't run full speed in a year and a half or 2 years. And I pretty much had written that off. Like I would not be running full speed. I would not be doing things without thinking about the effects of my foot before, because I depend on my feet so much for making money. And so
Sure.
that was the key piece, is like, I can't be injured. I don't have that
Right.
ability. After the doctors, after the surgery, they
Yeah.
the nerves have to realign, and so they start firing, and it's not friendly, but it's not like regular pain. It's just that you feel that they're firing and sensing how to communicate again. And
Right.
that's midway through PT.
Right.
And it started to come back after the X39, which is great in the long run, because then it's retraining and creating the muscle memory and the brain pathways.